Welcome to the Vet Med Wellness and Leadership Podcast, where we discuss central challenges vet med leaders face, such as burnout, stress, and difficult interactions with clients and staff, just to name a few. In each episode, you will hear about actionable solutions that you can apply to your practice and invitations to connect with fellow leaders who are passionate about improving the wellness of the vet med profession. By subscribing, liking, commenting, or sharing this podcast, you are helping more veterinary professionals find the resources shared in these episodes. Thank you in advance for listening and supporting this show. I hope you enjoy it. All right. Hey, everybody. Crystal Stokes here, and I am introducing to you a very special guest. It is Bret Canfield, who specializes in the marriage between engagement and efficiency in the veterinary profession. And we're going to talk more about what that even means. I think this is a special topic because, in my perspective, oftentimes these things are two different camps. And we're going to talk about how putting them together can be very, very important and powerful in veterinary medicine. So Bret, if you don't mind introducing yourself a little more fully, tell us about your background and how you got to this point today.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Crystal. And thanks for having me on. Hi, I'm Bret. Nice to meet you all. I've been working in veterinary medicine for quite a while now, well over a decade. And I've had the chance to work on the manufacturing side with a couple great companies, working in various roles, many of whom were dedicated to finding ways to creatively bring value to the veterinary industry. Currently, that's what I do pretty much 12 hours a day. I am the Director of Organizational Development right now with Summit Veterinary Referral Center, which is an amazing tertiary referral center, for those of y'all who don't know, up in Tacoma, Washington. And I just really love being in this industry and supporting all these great folks. So happy to be able to do what I do every day, and glad to be able to work with you, Crystal, to reach out to some folks.
Mm-hmm. Well, tell me this, going way back, like, were you interested in animals or medicine? Like, how did you even find yourself in this space?
It's a great question. Actually, I ended up getting into this space through sales. I mean, I've always been an animal lover. I talk all the time that my wife and I have several different kids, and all of them are furry. We don't have any human babies, just furry ones. So I've definitely always been an animal lover, but I got into the animal health industry through sales. I was working in human pharmaceuticals. I saw an opportunity to get into veterinary pharmaceuticals, and I thought, that sounds awesome. And P.S., humans are gross. So that seemed like a really fun thing to do. And over several years of working in that industry, I fell more and more in love with it and got sort of incrementally a little bit better month after month, year after year, at finding ways to focus on a couple of things we're going to be talking about today, such as engagement and efficiency, because everybody talks about bringing value, right? Everybody, no matter what industry you're in, everybody talks about bringing value. Mm-hmm. One of the biggest tricks about bringing value is knowing what your clients, what your customers, what your industry actually values. Mm-hmm. And in my experience in working in vet med, two of the biggest challenges that our clients face every single day are engagement and efficiency. So that's why I started to focus on those as my areas of interest.
Okay. So let's just go ahead and start defining that. For somebody listening today, they're going, what does that even mean? Like, give me some really concrete examples of these two things, engagement and efficiency.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll even start actually by misidentifying them. I'll tell you a little bit about what they're not. Everybody seems to think that efficiency is about getting the maximum result in the minimum amount of time. And I don't like that definition of efficiency. I think that efficiency is about maximizing every positive attribute that you possibly can about a situation and minimizing every negative attribute that you can about a situation. Mm-hmm. So, for example, I've gone into clinics before and they've said, Bret, can you help us get our wellness exams down to 15 minutes? And the answer is absolutely yes. Unfortunately, in order to do that, we're going to have to really make some sacrifices to potentially medical outcomes, client experience, staff experience, burnout, right? Things like that. And in that case, it's not a question of can you get the maximum result in the minimum amount of time? It's, is that what you want to do? Mm-hmm. Right? So efficiency is not a simple arithmetic equation, in my opinion. Efficiency it's complex, it's calculus, it's multivariable. So obviously I'm a geek about this stuff, but I think there's a lot of ways to track efficiency, and we can talk about those. But I think efficiency is trying to get the best, most holistic results that you possibly can while minimizing the bad stuff. And sometimes that's waste, sometimes that's cost, sometimes that's burnout, right? It can be all sorts of things.
I really appreciate the example. I just want to pause that, because on the example, to let that kind of soak in, because I think it's so easy to just look at one thing. Like, I want to have 15-minute appointments, because in my mind, right now we're doing 30-minute appointments. Right. If I can do it in 15, I'm doubling our revenue. Like, that's going to be amazing. That's going to change everything in our hospital. And I wouldn't even have thought about the costs. Like, what would it actually take to make that happen? The negative impact it would have on my staff, or how many more staff I'd even have to add, or what about the front desk and how efficiently that runs to make these things happen smoothly, so the clients aren't getting frustrated and annoyed that things are backed up. Like, to think through the entire process, that's where you're coming from when it comes to efficiency. You're looking at it like holistically, all the different variables that go into it. Am I getting it right?
I think you nailed it. Yeah. I mean, and that's the problem, is if you don't keep track of some of what we'll call sort of like these hidden variables, right? Like staff burnout is a famous one. If you're not trying to find a way to keep track of what impact is this having on your patient experience, right? Including medical outcomes, your client experience, and your staff experience, it's very easy for us to ignore those variables because sometimes they're not as tangible, right? Versus something like EBITDA, or revenue in general, or labor costs, or time. Those are very easy variables to track. So it's a common efficiency pitfall.
Ooh, this reminds me of when I was early on cutting my teeth in the coaching world. I was in Vienna, Austria, and I was just practicing on startup teams. And I was doing personality typology, like typing their staff. And I remember they had this one person in particular on their team that they said, this guy is just underperforming, like really inefficient. He was in a marketing position. And when I did his type, he was the type of person who is highly introverted, likes to work alone, likes to work on complex tasks in depth. Why is this person in a marketing positioning where he's like meeting 20 people a minute and everything's superficial? And so it's like his inefficiency is just a matter of role fit. So switch him to a better position, and boom, this person becomes very efficient, and he's happy now. He loves to come to work and enjoys his day instead of dreading it. That's the intangible part of like the people part. And okay. So
here's
keep going.
Where that gets really magical, right? Is that goes really nicely into the other half of this equation, which is engagement. Not only did that person end up being more efficient, but they also ended up being more engaged. So what does that mean, right? Well, I'll tell you what it doesn't mean. I think there's also a common misconception with engagement. I think the conception with engagement is that it's all about feelings, right? Engagement is like, I mean, do feelings matter? Yes. Are feelings real? Yes, right? But I think sometimes people, when you talk about engagement, there's a lot of folks that are like, oh, there's a lot of special snowflakes in veterinary medicine. We got to keep them happy. And I'll give you an example with this as well. I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of different managers, whether they're hospital managers or department managers within veterinary medicine. And a lot of those people end up being lifeguards all the time. And they know this. Anybody in that role who's listening to this, they know exactly what I'm talking about. A lot of their job is diffusing tension. So they go into a situation and it's like, oh, people are mad. My job is to make them less mad. People are scared. My job is to make them less scared. They think that's the same thing in engagement. And the problem you end up in, similar to the problem with oversimplifying efficiency, is if you oversimplify engagement, you spend all your time as a lifeguard. And my challenge to people when it comes to engagement is look at it more like a swim coach, right? Engagement isn't just about feelings. It's about fulfillment. It's about development. It's about culture and communication and training and role fit, to your point earlier, Crystal. I mean, I say all the time, just because a shoe doesn't fit, it doesn't make it a bad shoe, right? Your challenge as a leader is to find the right shoe for that right foot. That's engagement, right? So an engaged team is a team that's making the 1,000 choices that they're going to make that day, right? In an intentional, positive way. They want to be there. They're excited to be there. Are they still going to encounter challenges? Yeah, this is veterinary medicine. Challenges are part of the brochure. But it's not just about how people feel. It's about creating an entire ecosystem that allows people to flourish.
Oh, Yeah, I really appreciate that. I'm trying to put myself in a position of, when I was a youngster, I worked as a technician, and to think about the different places I worked where I just felt like a minion. Like you come in, you just do what you're told, and then you punch out, and you could feel there was no sense of development or concern about, did I enjoy any of this? Was it meaningful to me? Did I feel like I was really contributing to anything? But in other situations where it was the opposite, really feeling that I loved your analogy of the swim coach, to feel like I had a mentor. I had this one doctor that I felt he was like, I was a little bird under his wing, and he was very much helping me develop. And that made a huge difference in even in how I showed up. I just felt energetic and I wanted to be there.
Yeah. I mean, even, language matters. Just look at the difference in the analogy between a lifeguard. What does a lifeguard do? A lifeguard prevents somebody from drowning. Now, don't get me wrong. Preventing somebody from drowning is really, really important, right? But how do you feel when you just got saved from almost drowning? You're exhausted. You're scared, right? You feel beat up. I mean, waterboarding is not a recreation. Waterboarding is a torture, right? People don't come close to drowning because they enjoy it. Think about the difference between if you're a swim coach, right? And you're teaching somebody to swim, and they're getting it and they're doing it. They're going to feel invigorated. They're going to feel empowered. They're going to feel enlivened. Right. That's a huge difference between two kind of similar roles.
Yeah.
That's engagement. Is the difference between being like, hey, you didn't die today. That's awesome. But we can do better. And if in veterinary medicine, we can pivot from just preventing people from drowning to actually teaching people to swim and helping them to swim, we'd actually make some forward movement. And that would be pretty cool.
All right. So now my curiosity is piqued, and I'm thinking, all right, I'm down. I'm down with this idea. Of what
you're a believer.
I'm starting to believe it. So tell me more about the how. Like, what does this actually look like? And I don't know if you have stories of maybe examples or case studies of, this is where, I saw it, there was dysfunctional. Here's some things you did to change it. Or how do you go about marrying these two things together? Where would you like to take this? Where do you think it'd be most helpful for those of us listening that are just newly hearing about this, like me, and starting to buy in?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing I would tell anybody, myself included, from several years ago, is that what we do is we tend to latch onto one of these concepts, whether it's efficiency or engagement, and we tend to follow that, bunny hole all the way through. And my first piece of advice, or my first challenge to anybody would be, don't do that. Instead, realize that these two ideas of engagement and efficiency, they exist in a beautiful harmony. Right? It's like the difference between a problem and a polarity or a paradox. A problem is a simple thing, not necessarily simple, but it's a thing that you can actually fix. Engagement and efficiency, you're never done. They're never fixed. You never say, hey, Crystal, great news. Summit is now both efficient and engaged. I'm out. I did it.
Mike.
Right? Time to polish my laurels and declare victory. It doesn't work that way. These are aspirational goals. You're always trying to achieve them. It's like humility. The minute you go around telling everybody how humble you are, you're not, right? So don't try to fix your hospital or your team. Don't try to make them either efficient or engaged. Realize that the two of these things are incredibly interconnected. I have seen very few teams that are able to maintain any level of efficiency if they're disengaged. And at the same time, I've seen very few teams that are super engaged that won't be efficient and figure out a way. So it's almost like trying to manage both of those polarities at the same time, right?
Got it. Yeah, that makes sense. And how would I gauge where my team is on the spectrum in either of those areas?
Yeah, I mean, as somebody who's delved into this for a long time, I really love data. I am a geek. So one of my first tools that I would suggest is start looking at some data. And I'll give you some very specific examples. When you're looking at things like engagement and you want to create any kind of objective criteria, I think step one, for example, is using engagement surveys for your team. They're not hard to create. Now, every organization is different. I'm on a team of like 230 plus individuals. So there's a lot of engagement data to gather.
Yeah.
So I've created just like a Google document that I send out to our team every quarter. And I try to break it down by department and I try to break it down by role. And I give people both the option of writing free-form answers, which is like, this bugs me, I don't like this. And I also give people the option, right, of scoring things on a scale from 1 to 5. And that gives me some data. Now, is it incredibly objective data? No, it's still soft data, but it gives me some things that I can look at quarter to quarter, or even more often, if I'm particularly concerned about a department or anything like that, I can send out one to cardiology this week if we're implementing a new program or having a new person start and saying, hey, I really want to check in. Let me send out a quick pulse survey to the team. And it allows you to get some of that data. I always put it this way, right? In veterinary medicine, we do our physical exam, but we also do our diagnostics. Doing things like this for engagement, doing surveys, it provides us diagnostic data. It doesn't tell you what to do, but it tells you where to look, right? And it's the same with things like efficiency. Now, efficiency is a lot easier to get objective data. So one of the things that I would start to look at when you're looking at efficiency is, what process in the hospital, what element of the hospital do I want to make sure is running well, or do I want to run better? So let's say, for example, it's your surgeries. Let's say right now you're only able to fit in 2 prophylactic dentals a day. And you're like, I need to do more surgeries. One question to ask is, have you looked at some of the common log jams that might occur in an area like surgery, like start time? Do you want to be in your OR by 9 a.m. every morning? I'd start just keeping track on a pad of paper. What time did I actually end up making my first incision or doing my first thing, whatever that is in the day? How long do certain things take? Create a time map, right? How long does it take your team to do full mouth x-rays in a large dog? If it takes 8 minutes, you're pretty much the fastest I've ever seen. And that's pretty good. I haven't seen anybody faster than that. If it takes you 45 minutes, you're not the slowest I've ever seen, but you can probably do better, right? And not to over answer your question, Crystal, but because I'm in geek mode, I'll just say this last thing. Try to find good variables. Like, one of my favorites, for example, is sales per labor hour. If you're looking at sort of holistic efficiency, sales per labor hour doesn't give you tons of variables, but it gives you a good idea of how much is my team producing, what's our throughput, what's our revenue, in terms of our labor costs. So how much people energy does it take to produce how much of a result? And that will give you a pretty good benchmark of where your team is at in any given role or department.
Geek out all you want, because the devil's in the details. I do think that one of the pitfalls I sometimes notice when I listen to podcasts is that they can be inspirational. I go, oh, yes, this idea, it's wonderful. But then when I think about implementing it, there wasn't enough of the rubber meets the road to really apply it. And I think by sharing concrete details like this, I could go back to a hospital and say, let's pick that one area that seems log jammed. Let's go ahead and start tracking it, just like Bret said. That is so doable. That is very concrete. Or creating our own survey. I really appreciate, my company's name is Bespoke. So I'm a huge fan of customization. And the fact that you work in an organization with how many, 200 and what, 60?
Right now, 230-ish in a given minute.
It's a lot of people, to be willing to customize something for that many people in all these different departments and to really take the time, I think that speaks volumes to really showing that you care and that you want to know. And as a staff member to know, somebody wants to know my answer to this question, that makes me feel engaged, that you're asking me to have in long form, what's bothering me, or how's this working for me, or on a scale of 1 to 5, how do I feel about it? So I appreciate you also noting that. Sure, you could probably find some engagement surveys that are just canned, and you can use that too if you're short on time. But if you can go on Google Docs, I love Google Forms, and create your own, that's another way to do it. Like, what would actually measure things that matter to you in your hospital? Think about it. Take the time and think about it, is what you're saying.
Absolutely. I mean, we all know that one size fits all doesn't fit any particular person very well, right? So, I mean, if anybody ever wants and says, I don't even know where to start, Bret, I'm lost, I'm languishing, I'll give everybody my contact information at the end. You can always contact me, and I'm more than happy to give you a starting point. But I do think that customization goes a long way. And to your point, Crystal, I think the next step is also showing people what you're going to do with that data, right? Because asking someone the question, how do you feel, that's a great first step, but it's only a first step.
Oh, yeah.
Right? If I never do anything with that data, all I've proven to people is that I know enough to ask the question, but don't care enough to act on the answer.
Oh, Bret, I have so heard this. So, this is very common. And I'm glad you brought it up, because it's like, warning, don't step in this trap. If you're going to ask the question and collect the data, you need to be willing to be responsive to the data. Otherwise, people feel kind of abandoned. Like if they said, hey, I'm really hurting, this is a big problem. And you go, yeah, gotcha.
Yep.
See you later. Oh my gosh, that's even worse than not asking.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
Being seen, being heard, it matters.
Yeah.
But being seen and being heard are not valuable unless you also know that you're cared about, right? Because if you're going to be vulnerable and show your authentic self and say, okay, Bret, you asked the question, I'll tell you, I think this new program sucks. I think it's doing this, this, and this. And I go, okay, super duper, thanks for the answer. But then I never actually do anything. They're probably never going to trust me again to give real feedback, because why would they bother? It's a waste of their time.
Totally.
Another pitfall that we often make in veterinary medicine, because we're always so darn busy, is that sometimes we get the information, we act on the data, but nobody knows, right? So closing that loop and saying, Crystal, I can't thank you enough for your answers. Here's what I heard you say. Here's what I think we should do about it. And I want to loop you in on, here are our action plans. And if you're really going to be a superstar about it, I'd love for you to hold me accountable. My goal is by this date, we will have done this or implemented your feedback in this way. And if you're not seeing that, if you're not feeling it, please do reach out. Because one of the interesting things about engagement is that people will find an outlet to voice how they feel.
Yeah.
They will, right? I mean, I know I will. I will find a way to voice how I feel. It just might not be a very productive way. And if you give people meaningful, productive outlets, right, positive outlets, and say, your opinion matters, here's how you can give it to me, maybe it will reduce things like gossip. Maybe it will reduce things like clickiness or coalition building, or so many of these negative behaviors that our industry is consumed with, partly just because people don't feel like they actually have a clear voice or a clear path, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, that is... I see that a lot. It's a big issue. I think a lot about company culture and these team dynamics and what really created them. And because sometimes there's this feeling of, oh, it's just toxic, but nobody wants to behave that way. It doesn't feel good to gossip. It doesn't feel good to triangulate or talk behind somebody's back. So, ultimately, if we're given pathways and we say, hey, do it this way. Here's what you can do to be heard. And here's what's going to happen as a result. I also want to speak to a challenge that I often see is where, let's say data's been collected. So let's say I'm a practice manager and I know there are these 5 different issues that all are begging to be addressed. And I've had these one-on-ones and group meetings with my team and I hear them. However, I'm so overwhelmed, I definitely can't get to all 5 of them right now. At best, I can do 1. So then, there's that feeling, I think, that some practice managers experience of, I'm failing. If I can't do it all immediately, I'm failing. But I think what's more important and what the data also shows is that people are okay with you not getting it all done right now, but keeping them involved in the process to just announce, we're going to start with this one and here are the plans for the next 4 over time. It may not go 100% according to plan, but at least they're not going to fall off the plate. We're aware of them. We're working on them. And then even better, I say to my practice managers, is to enlist them in the process, to say, build them into the solution. You shouldn't do it all yourself. That is insanity. That's a recipe for disaster. How do you enlist people in the process? But I would love to ask you a question from your, depth of experience. How do you deal with that forever perception of there's no time and we're short staffed? So let's say we've identified this issue in the hospital that we want to improve. And I, as a practice manager or medical director, would like to enlist 3 or 4 people to help make this happen. But I'm afraid to even ask because I know they're already at the end of their rope. Have you faced this, or do you have any creative solutions for that? Yeah. I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'm dying to know.
No, I love it. I mean, again, similar to what we were talking about before, I don't know if it's something that can be fixed. I think it's something that can be actively managed, right? Like this is not a simple surgery. This is not identify the problem, cut it open, pull the problem out, sew it up, you're good to go. This is like internal medicine. It's derm, right? It's hard. It's muddy. It's complex. It's one of the reasons I love it. When it comes to things like this, I think there's 1,000 different approaches. I'll throw out a couple. One of the approaches is that most people in veterinary medicine recognize the fact that maybe the way we're doing it isn't the best way to do it. Most of our systems and structures, if we have them in veterinary medicine, evolved very organically. Mm-hmm. When I ask somebody, hey, walk me through what you're up to, and just no judgment, but talk to me about why you did it that way. The answer I almost always hear is that's the way I've always done it, or that's the way I was trained.
Yeah.
I almost never get an answer because we've tried it 6 different ways and we've decided as a team that this is the best way to do it. I never get that answer. So it's one of those simple things where we tend to do what we do because that's what we do. And I think challenging your team's assumptions with innovation and prototyping. My team is so tired of me talking about prototyping because I think it's incredibly important. I think if you want to do something new, instead of taking this idea that we often do in veterinary medicine, which is we need to have a meeting about it, and then a meeting about it, and then a meeting about it, and then a meeting to plan the meeting before the meeting to have the meeting about it. And we're going to come up with a perfect plan. It's going to be perfect. And then we're going to do it. First of all, it's not going to be perfect. And second of all, what we end up doing is always putting perfection above progress, right? And my challenge instead is to say, think of how you would want this to work and then try it out. And put a deadline on that trial, right? Say, hey, we're going to try this for a week or a day or a patient or whatever it is, and then come up with a scorecard of some kind. How are we going to determine whether or not this was successful, right? What are we going to measure? We should be measuring something, even if it is soft data like a survey, or it could be hard data like how long did that take? What was the outcome? How did the client respond, right? Because one of the things we do a lot in our industry is we'll take either of these ideas to the extreme, right? I often hear in veterinary medicine that some folks will be like, it's all about efficiency. I'm all about workflow and processes and profit. It's one of the reasons corporate medicine gets a bad rap because everyone's like, all they care about are the numbers. I get it, right? The problem is if you take efficiency to the nth degree, then in some ways you're kind of putting people last. People are not a number, right? And if you do that, you're going to lose your engagement. And most efficiency in most vet hospitals, most of the time, is engagement by choice, not engagement by structure, right? People are either deciding, hey, I'm going to get this done, or they're like, meh, I'm okay if this goes slowly. I'm just punching the clock. And the same is true on the opposite end of the spectrum. If all you're focused on is your team's engagement and like I'm diffusing tension, I want everyone to feel happy, I want everyone to feel fulfilled. Awesome. But we also got to start throwing up some numbers, right? We're in the business of saving lives. That's what we've chosen to do in this industry. As a result, we have to find some ways to make sure that there's some data behind it, that there's some numbers behind it.
Right.
And the last thing I'll challenge, Crystal, is our language. I hear words like busy all the time. I use words like busy all the time. I hate it.
I know.
I hate the word busy.
Yes, I agree. It's like the badge of busy, isn't it? And we use it just as like a throwaway word. Like we say it.
Yep.
Hey, how's life, man? Oh, I'm just so busy. It's like
busy.
What if we didn't have that word? What might we say that's more accurate? Like my brain has to flex really hard to figure out a more accurate way of saying it.
I know. And it's a fascinating thing. People will often tease me because I'll say things like abundant. It doesn't quite mean the same thing as busy. It means there's a lot going on, right? Robust. Sometimes I'll ask people when I say, how are things? They're like, it's busy. And I'll say, is it productive? Because productive is not the same as busy. Busy is a feeling. It's I'm expending energy, right? But there's a difference between how much energy are you expending and what kind of results are you getting. You know, the other thing we do a lot in veterinary medicine is we reward people for suffering, essentially, right? I'll walk around my hospital sometimes and people will say, hey, it's a hard day. Can you order us some cookies? And I get it because that's the behavior that we always recognize, which is like, what, things are hard? They're suffering. Things are bad. Here's a treat. Here's a lollipop. Here's a cookie. And I teach my team all the time that, right, from Boss Baby, like cookies are for closers. And what I mean by that is let's find a positive reason And it could be anything. It could be like, Bret, we just did this really hard surgery. I mean, I was in my clinic earlier today, and they did a bilateral adrenal surgery. I didn't even know that was a thing. So when I stopped by and said, how are you doing? They were excited. They were engaged. They were geeked out. And I was like, this is the kind of day where I want to buy everybody a treat and say, hey, way to show up.
Yeah.
Way to love what you do. Way to do cool things. Instead of when it's a hard day saying, hey, let me buy you all pizza and contribute to your self-destruction.
Okay, the nerdy therapist in me is going to comment on this because you're nailing it. So as psychotherapists, we often work with behavioral interventions with kids or in a relationship. And some of the strategies we use are, like, let's say, I'll use an animal as an example instead, since we're talking to a bunch of animal folk. Let's say, you're really annoyed that your cat jumps on the sofa and you want your dog jumps on the sofa and you want your dog to not jump on the sofa. If every time the dog jumps on the sofa, you go pick the dog up, that's giving the dog reward. It wants attention. It's like, that's the cookie. You just had a bad day. Here's a cookie. Your brain's like, definitely going to have more of those bad days because I love a cookie. Yep. Now, if instead you go up to your dog and you pet your dog and say, good dog, while it's sitting on the floor on that little, blanket that you gave it, on the place you want it to stay. Like, so celebrating the good behavior or even the triumph. And that's something that we study cultural development in the most kick-ass companies on the planet. There's a lot of celebration of overcoming challenges together. Like, we just had a big, busy day, worked hard together. We're all sweating, and it was, a butt kicker, but it was awesome. Like, we did it together, and, look at what we did. We triumphed. Right. So it's that kind of positivity and growth. And I have to loop back because I don't want to forget this one. Earlier, when you were highlighting this kind of prototyping model, I thought, oh, you would just be a fish in water up in Silicon Valley, right? Startup culture. Because I learned it the hard way. I definitely came, I guess the way I was just, my whole orientation prior to living there, I was there for grad school, was always about like, build everything first and make it perfect and then show it to the world. And the world's like, that's not what I asked for. And you go, oh, shoot, I'm a big loser. and I learned when I lived there in the Bay Area that you never do that. That's not even how creations are made. They should be, it's just experimental. Like, how does a child learn to walk? They fall like 800 times, probably more than that. And through the little mini failures and course corrections, we adapt and we adjust and we keep building it better and better. And so if we can look at how we implement solutions within a company as mini experiments, teensy little experiments over and over and over into infinity, just you're constantly developing and improving the process. There's no perfection that you should create beforehand and then launch. That's a big waste of time. And even better yet, if you do the experiments or prototyping with the team included in the building process, they're bought into it. They contributed. They want to do it rather than top down. Like, we're going to tell you all to do this new thing. Now do it. It's like, that's really exciting. Not really at all.
Right. And then our job, right, as participants usually is to poke holes in things and to kick the tires and to point out why it was a stupid idea. Whereas if you iterate, if you prototype, right, people will get on board. One of the rules that I have, with the teams I work with, for example, is, hey, team, we're going to try something. Okay. And here's how long we're going to try it for. And here's the outcome that we're looking for. Right. Again, some kind of scorecard. Because to your point, Crystal, it's really hard to celebrate at the end of a game, right? Where you're like, yay, it's the end. Did we win? I don't know. Is there a scoreboard? I don't even know what we were tracking. I enjoyed myself, but like in veterinary medicine, sometimes our only parameters for success are like how we feel and did we get to go home on time? And we can do way better than that, right? Mm-hmm. So what I'll tell my team is, we're going to do this prototype. We're going to do it for this amount of time, and here's how we're going to track it. I only have one criteria. You're not allowed to sabotage it. That's it. If you all give this the college try, right? If you're like, yeah, we're going to do it, and we're going to see if it works, and it doesn't, I'll be the first person to go, that was a bad idea, right? Or that was an unsuccessful prototype, but you can't sabotage it. If you sabotage it, clock resets.
Oh, I like that. Good. You're setting the rules. Like, these are the rules of the game. Right. Yeah. Smart.
And we're all, the two most common comments that I hear at Summit, for example, and I love my hospital so much, so I think this is true everywhere. But when I'm walking around the floor amongst, where the magic happens, people will say, comment number one, nothing around here ever changes. Nothing changes. Don't even bother. Everything's always the same. You know what comment number 2 is? Oh my God, stop all the change. So how do those two things exist at the same time? And part of it is that as human beings, we are very uncomfortable with change.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Change is uncomfortable by definition. Growth is uncomfortable by definition. They don't call them growing pleasures, right? They call them growing pains. So not only is what you're saying incredibly important from a psychological standpoint, it's important from a change management standpoint. If I tell somebody, hey, we are going to change everything we do, and I've developed the perfect system, and here's what that looks like, I'm putting them into challenger mode. Versus if I say, hey, what would you guys think about looking at this? And starting small. Like, for example, instead of me going into a hospital and saying, hey, I've observed that our patients aren't always having a good fear-free experience, right? I'm detecting a lot of moments where fear, anxiety, and stress is causing engagement problems and efficiency problems and injuries and all sorts of problems. So my recommendation is that we become a fear-free certified hospital, and we're going to do this whole big thing. Automatically, people are going to be like, whoa, let me explain to you the 35,000 reasons that won't work.
Mm-hmm.
Versus if I say something like, hey, something small, right? I noticed that when we bring pets over to the scale, they're like, I'm scared. I don't want to get on the scale. I think part of the reason is that this chair is right next to the scale, so they don't have an escape route. What would you guys think about moving this chair for like a day? Let's just move the chair for the day, and let's kind of keep an eye on it and see if pets have maybe a more positive or a less positive or even a neutral reaction.
Yeah.
I'm probably not going to get 35,000 reasons not to do that. I'm probably going to be like, one chair for a day. Okay.
Yes. Right.
Gradual. Microdoses.
Yes. That humans, yes, we do not like big changes. Smaller is much easier for us to handle. And yeah, I feel like I could just ask you about 10 million more questions, but for sake of time, I'm going to ask you 2 more questions.
Shoot.
The first one would be, if you had to have one clear take-home message for people listening today and everything that we talked about, what do you want our audience to walk away from this podcast knowing? What's that take-home message for today?
It's a good question. I guess for me, because I'm such a geek on both, I would say pay attention to the efficiency and the engagement on your team. That's the single biggest one for me. Pay attention to both. Pay attention to them in equal measure. And if you already think that you're amazing at this, I lovingly challenge that. I have been working at this as almost my full-time job for a long time, and I don't even think I'm remotely amazing at this. These are really hard.
Yeah.
And I don't think you ever quite get there. I just think sometimes it's well managed and sometimes it's poorly managed. So
wonderful.
That would be my 2 cents.
Takes a long time to earn that black belt. And Bret, how about this? What is your favorite part about the work that you do?
I mean, I'm going to use a word that I think is overused in the COVID era, but my favorite thing about what I do is I get to work with heroes every day. And here's what I mean by that. I am not a tech. I never have been. I'm not a vet. I never have been. I don't have those skill sets. Part of it is, organic chemistry. It's hard. I'm not good at it. But part of it is that's not my jam. What I see all day, every day in these hospitals is I see the best level of patient care that I could possibly imagine. What I don't see are leaders, and God knows we're all trying, but I don't see us supporting our people to the same level that our people support our pets. And my favorite thing about what I do is that I am trying all day, every day to aspire to that. And I'm not sure I'm ever going to get there, but those are the kind of things, in my opinion, that are worth aspiring for.
Speaking of my heart, Bret, you and I are both on a mission. Yes. Right? The people that care for these animals do amazing work, and they deserve to be cared for too. Absolutely. Yes. Well, on that note, how can people reach you if they'd like to pick your brain, maybe ask you for some guidance on how to do this better, or share their own stories about what they're experiencing with their efficiency and engagement process in their hospital? How can they find you?
Yeah, stop by my hospital. No, I'm kidding. Probably, I'm bad at social media, partly because I work in a hospital for 12 to 16 hours a day. So I'll give everybody my email. Best way to reach me is just my first name, last name. It's Bret, which is Bret, just one, .Canfield, just like a can in a field, at gmail.com.
Fabulous.
If there's things I can do to be of service, if you've got questions, if you want to be, see an example of sales per labor hour or a pulse survey, more than happy to send it your way.
So generous of you. I really appreciate your willingness to share those tips and tools and all the great ideas that you brought to this talk today. I think it's very thought-provoking and a new, refreshing way to look at how to manage a hospital. And I hope that the people today can take away some of these gems and start running their own little mini protocols in their hospitals.
I really appreciate it. The truth is, everything I know and everything I do, I have gotten from other sources, other people, and I think we all need to be here for each other. There is no secret sauce, right? There's no like super special formula for how to make all this work. There's just people helping people and people helping pets.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to play my very small part, and I so appreciate what you do, Crystal. Thank you for making all this possible.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so nice to work with you and to have a fellow in the field that's doing great work. So thanks for being on today, Bret.
It's truly my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for joining me today. I hope that you feel stoked after listening to this episode. And as always, I would love to hear your comments and feedback. Is there a topic that you want to know more about? Please let me know. And thank you again for subscribing and sharing your favorite episodes with others. It really means a lot.